Now, where did I put it? Here it is. Welcome to the Toolbox, where my guests and I discuss the tools they use every day to manage life, trauma, and everything in between. It may not be applicable right now, but it's another tool for your toolbox. And I hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to Tools for the Toolbox. I am Chance Burles, as you know, aka Big Bird, and I have another outstanding guest for you all today. And we're going to start it off the same way I always do it, with the same question. Who are you, and what is your military background?
Yes, my name is Chris Lee, and I was a Green Beret in the United States Army.
How long did you do that for?
Yeah, I signed up in 2012 and just got out last year, so just about 10 years.
Just about 10 years. And so one question I actually have about the Green Berets that I've never actually asked before is, what are your contracts like? Because for us, when I got in, it was an initial 5-year contract for us to do, to be in the Army. When I
came in, I signed up for 3 or 4 years for that initial contract. Mm-hmm. And then once I got picked up after selection and went through the Q course, I enlisted for another 3. And then while I was in Germany, I went straight to Germany after the Q course. And while I was over there, I enlisted for another 3.
Okay.
So by the time I got out, I wound up re-upping two or so times.
Interesting. Is it a difficult thing to do in the U.S. Army? 'Cause it doesn't seem like it's like all you see the pictures and the videos of the people just like randomly just swearing themselves in again, and it's all good. But I imagine there's probably more paperwork to it.
There is some paperwork involved for sure, and if you want to do it official, you need an officer to swear you in.
Okay.
Actually, a couple of our guys, when we were in Afghanistan last year, they wound up swearing in for a couple of them went in depth, so they were signing up for another 6 years to round out their 20 years career. But we did it on top of a mountain, so we had like the U.S. flag and our team flag up there. It was pretty awesome.
That's pretty wicked. Yeah, we don't get that at all. If you're even close to your EOS date, you don't go on deployment at all. Like it's one of those weird things. For some odd reason, they're like thinking that we're just gonna like put our weapons down or something. Be like, okay, my contract's over. See you guys later, and just walk off. Like, yeah, peace. I'm out. But I can't see us doing that in like rural Afghanistan. Be like, okay, that was the day. I'm done, guys. We'll see you later.
Yeah, I'll get my own flight back.
yeah. I don't think that would happen. But yeah, the Canadian military is weird on this. Is that we have something called the universality of service, which basically means that if you can't deploy in any way, you can't be in the forces. Period.
Oh, really?
It's
interesting.
It's messed up. So like guys get hurt or have some sort of marital problem or something that would prevent you from deploying. If you're like undeployable, you're out. Done. So there were guys that lost a leg or something but wanted to stay in and do the work, and they were like, nope, bye. Mm-hmm. It was just very odd. Yet we see guys in the States who like missing 2-3 limbs and still working, still deploying.
Absolutely.
Dang.
That's I can't speak for like the big army over here, but in our community, we actually did a really good job of if a guy needs to take a knee, like, hey, stuff at home is horrible. I need a break. Dude, go handle family stuff, and then when you're ready, come back. Or you mentioned missing limbs. Yeah, there was a guy, a warrant officer, right across the hall from us that had lost a leg from the knee down, and he was still doing his job. He was, ready to go. So that's interesting that Canada doesn't do that.
It just makes sense to me. You have experienced, trained personnel who just happen to be missing a leg or missing an arm or like whatever, and you release them, like just drop them off into the world. Like, okay, man, thanks, see you later. It never sat right with me. But that's just Canadian military is weird. We do weird things. So what do you just got out? What do you do now?
So I got out in April of last year, and I started a performance coaching business. And I've kind of dumped all of my eggs in that basket, and it's been quite the adventure so far. It's part of the reason I left at 10 years as opposed to 20 was because I wanted to try a different adventure, and that's kind of what this is. And it's been a lot of fun so far, helping people kind of realize their real potential and then creating a plan to actualize on that. Something, and you would know this, like the military is really good at backwards planning. And so that's kind of what I focus on, and helping folks figure out exactly how to get to where they want to be.
Yeah, that's. I had a conversation with. He was an American infantier. He was. I can't. Anyway, we were talking about going to school and how absolutely simple it is once you come out of the military. Where it's just like I have to show up at like 9-ish.
Too easy.
Okay, sure. And you do all the planning ahead of time. And you're like, okay, it takes me 12 minutes to walk from the parking garage in order to get into the classroom. And then it takes me 20 minutes to drive from my home to the parking garage. Give me five minutes to find a parking spot. And you work it all out. And you're like, I need to leave at 8.
Exactly.
Okay, leave at 8. And you're good to go, right? It seems so simple, but it just doesn't get taught very often outside of our world. So you've only been out. Has it been a year and change, or like not quite a year?
Just shy of a year. So April of last year. So we'll be coming up on a year this April.
So how was your transition so far? How's it been?
I've heard some horror stories of guys from my community going to work in the civilian sector, and it just being very difficult to adjust. And so I cheated a little bit, and I worked for myself. And so I kind of bypassed a lot of the butting heads with civilian mindset, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So to be honest, my transition out of the military has been pretty painless. Having that going away party with my team, and then doing all the ridiculous paperwork that's required, and then just applying the work ethic that I acquired over my military career towards my own endeavors now. And I think the hardest thing is because I have so much freedom now, and I am my own boss, I really have to become a master of my schedule and really stay on top of things. And because if I don't, I'm reacting to life, and I'm not dictating where I want to be. Then things just pile up, and you know how it goes.
Oh yeah. I was. I had a chat. I had Fran. I can't pronounce it. Narechopi. I can't remember his last name. He's a Green Beret. He's got the Jedburgh podcast. And we were talking about something similar with the fact that once it's all on you, it's all on you, and that's it, man. and he said, hope is not a plan of action. And I was like,
exactly,
100%. It isn't. You got to put it. You got to write it down. You got to do all the stuff, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But if you could go back 10 months now and talk to yourself on day one EOS, what would you tell yourself to make that even easier?
Sure. And that's a good question. I think kind of the initial shock of having all that free time, I sat around for a while. And I think if I could go back and say, hey, the job's not done. Like you're still on mission. You're just not doing it in the Army anymore, and not that I, let my life fall apart or whatever, but I think I could have capitalized on, several weeks or months even of more effort or better planned effort. Then I could just be a little bit further than where I am now.
Yeah. I it's kind of it's a bit of a razor's edge on that spot too, because I know guys that have they got out and they just went to work and they just grind, pound it out, and then a year or 2 years down the road, and they're just like, oh my god, and they were just exhausted.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
it also kind of blends into mission creep too, right? So the civilian world and being outside of the Army, you have your mission, but it's so vast, I guess would be the word I would use, but because it never really stops. You don't have an index or a point where you go, okay, we're going home, we got to clean and refit. Like there's none of that. It just continues and continues every day. There's more work.
Right.
So like I've seen people burn themselves out, but I've also seen people just thrive in it as well. Just take on the work and be like, and now I'm on, and they just go with it. It's kind of a toss up. So what have you been? What do you got planned then for the next little while? Because you got big hopes and dreams, and you're killing it on social media right now. What's the next? What's coming up in the next little while?
So right now I'm kind of in phase one of kind of my business model, which is primarily one-on-one coaching, which I love, because interacting with people on an individual basis and helping them level up their life, I think that's the best way to fix society and this generation in general.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one-on-one, and that's what I really like to do, and I think I'm relatively good at it. Phase two, though, I think we'll be kind of expanding on that. Some folks are they shy away from maybe the price point, or they're just not in a position where they can afford it. Or even I've had like high schoolers reach out to me like, "Hey man, I got to get my life together. Help me." And some 18-year-old's not going to be able to, maybe afford my packages or whatever. And so, all right, so how do I help them too? A lot of that is the free content on the social media, which, as we were talking earlier, is incredibly uncomfortable. But I think in the near future, maybe start building courses or packages at like a reduced rate that'll be more accessible to everybody. Because again, I think it's when you start taking responsibility of your own life and really planning out how you want to live and the direction you want to go, and most importantly, the kind of person you want to become. It just helps everyone around you. And so if we can get everyone doing that, I think we'll just be sitting better,
Yeah, it's a challenge though, because, when I help other guys, people who are struggling, and, I get phone calls in the middle of the night and they're, not in a great spot. And the verbiage I always use is, I can show you the door, right? I can tell you as best as I know how I got through it. And I can bring people on the podcast and I can listen to how they got through their issues and how they did all that stuff. But how do you get people to actually walk through that door? Like, how do you do it? Because there's certain ways I have, but I really want to hear it. Like, what are your thoughts on that? How do you get that through to people?
And that's an excellent point. And you can never force someone to change. They have to really want it. And the way I've tried to encourage that desire for change is to help people realize the kind of person they could become if they just put forth some consistency and discipline. Their whole life could be different. Whether that's physically, like working out steadily, or financially, like putting away money and investing and not just blowing it on whatever every week, being intentional with the decisions you make in life. I show them where they are now, and I let them dream of the person they could be in as close as 5 years from now. And when they start to see like, oh wait, this is kind of possible. I could be in a way different position and station in life if I just do this. And that's where that desire for change kind of starts to show up, because it's not just me showing them my own life. It's like, look, this could be you, and applying the value system that they have established in their own life and showing them the potential.
What do you think would be, as a bit of a buzzword, friggin' clickbaity kind of question here, but like, what's one thing people could do? Like the average person who's never had any experience with, resilience or shared hardship, any of these things, right, that we get used to in the Army. What's one thing that would probably help them the most?
For the regular person that's never done anything, and this is applicable, I think, in any endeavor, not just like physically or mentally or financially. It's like wherever you start super small. And there's guys like David Goggins that will just go run 100 miles, and that's awesome. Good for him. I don't think most of the population will do that. So I encourage a lot of people to start so small that the steps require zero motivation and zero willpower. Because if you rely on the willpower, if you rely on the motivation, that bucket goes empty pretty quick. And so if you're relying on that, it's not going to take you very far.
Yeah.
But rather, if you can start doing things super, super tiny, and I use this example often, it's like brushing your teeth. It requires no thought anymore because you've just been doing it. And you do it because it aligns with your value system. You don't want to have bad breath and you want to keep your teeth, but it's such a small thing, but you do it every day. And so that's the kind of step you want to take, something that takes 2 minutes or 10 minutes and it requires so little effort mentally that you can do it over and over and over again. And in the long run, that compound interest of effort just accrues and then you're sitting pretty.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, the ability to start small is so key. And the funny thing is that we do it without thinking about it, right? When you first learn how to do anything, you're going to learn how to do the smallest amount you possibly can, right? Like it's going to be tiny. And when, I tell my son this when he gets really frustrated with, not learning something right away. And I'm like, how long did it take you to learn how to walk? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like at least a year, right? And you weren't thinking about practicing. You just were. You wanted to walk around with us, right? And it took you a while to figure it out. How long did it take you to run really fast? And he goes, well, I was pretty fast already. And I'm like, no, I get that. But like, how do you run really fast? And it's like, well, I just ran a lot. And I was like, that's it. You pick. And the other thing was, the whole new year, new me, the resolutions and all these things, or when people decide that they want to be better, they pick like 8 things at once. I'm gonna eat right. I'm gonna work out every day, and I'm gonna and you just start adding all these things. It's like, no, you're not. Right. No, you're not. It's just silly. I was gonna ask a point on that, but on the flip side, so this was another one of the things I struggled with early on when I first got out, was comparing to what I used to be. Right, when people who are like, oh yeah, I was a star in high school, and then I started working, and then and so when I first got out, I relaxed. Right, I focused. What I did was I focused on my mental health and tried to figure out that and get over the symptoms of PTSD and stuff. But I let my body slide, which made it harder in the long run. But that's what I did. And so when I went back to the gym, I started lifting like I used to. And I immediately hurt my back, and it was bad. And it wasn't until I actually figured out how to put my ego down and say, start at the basics, start again, just reset, go over again. That I actually found success. But how do you get people to put that ego down? How do you get them to stop driving like that?
Yeah. Putting down that ego is huge. Setting aside that, I used to be able to do this, or back in my day, or when I was an operator, or in high school, or whatever. But keeping up is easier than catching up. And so if you can maintain over the long haul, it's way, way easier. And you can bounce back from maybe a week off, from the gym. But if you've taken some time off, if it's been 6 months or a year or 5 years since you exercised or whatever, you're a beginner again. Just own it, and I've learned that lesson myself. Even I just got out last year and taking some time off, and then trying to jump back on underneath the squat bar. It's like, maybe I should take some plates off. Check my ego at the door and say, all right, let's focus on that mobility, make sure that the core is strong, and make sure I'm doing the form correctly, and then we'll start putting plates back on. So
yeah, that's a smart way to do it, man. I mean, I remember when I first got out and I was looking for work, and I was like, well, I was an engineer, so I have lots of explosive time, and I can I know what I'm doing, and did some research, and they were like, yeah, you're gonna have to start as a general laborer, because already we don't count explosive time from the military into civilian world. And I'm like, that means I'm going to be drilling holes and I'm going to be carrying stuff all day. And I'm like, I just got out of the Army to stop doing that. I don't really want to go back into that. But it's true. Like you just gotta, that's what you want, right? You gotta be able to just say, okay, cool. Let's show me what to do. So we were talking earlier and I was asking, what's the biggest tool that you used for maintaining your well-being, and you came up with journaling. So how long have you been journaling? Has it been something you carried on through before the military? Did you learn it in the military and then carried it on, or how did that all come about?
Repeat that last one.
Oh, did I lose you?
Just a little bit.
Okay. I was saying that when we were talking earlier, you had said that we were the thing that you use to maintain your well-being, the tool that you use most was journaling. Did you learn that beforehand? Like before the Army? Have you been doing it most of your life? Like, where did that start, and how? Like, bring us through that journey.
I'll blame my dad for that one. He required my sister and I to keep a journal from a very young age. He's a super smart guy, and at first it was just another task that I hated doing. But you wrote in it and did your little entry for the day. And then eventually he stopped requiring it, but it had become kind of like a habit, and not something that I would do even every day. But eventually I got to the point where this was after college, where journaling had become, I don't want to throw around the word therapy, but maybe it was a way for me to take the thoughts that were rattling around in my coconut and put them down. And then I could like look at them. They weren't just like bouncing around inside. And I could take a step back and kind of examine what was going on inside my mind. And so that became incredibly helpful, leading up to enlisting in the Army, and a theme that particularly the years and particularly the months leading up to my enlistment was, mediocrity is the enemy. I see a lot that people talk about, the ego is the enemy. And I kind of hate using that language because the ego is part of you. I don't ever want to refer to myself as the enemy, and so in my own journaling exercises, it was always average is the enemy, or mediocrity is the enemy. I don't want to be just average, because I think humans have a great deal of potential within them, and I wanted to really chase after that, and that's what led to my enlistment, and then doing special forces, and then even now getting out. So to answer your question, it was my dad's doing that started the journaling practice for sure.
Did you find that journaling helped you through the training? Did you like maintain it while you were going through your basic and all your stuff? You kept it.
For sure. It was kind of that similar theme of going like through the Q course and after selection and stuff. And part of my journaling was just to keep track of large events and kind of daily happenings and stuff. Because I think it's important to document your life. You forget a lot more than you think. And then looking back on these journals, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh wow, that was a big time in my life, and I had totally forgotten about it. So yeah, throughout training, I did quite a bit of it, and then particularly after I got to the teams and stuff, journaling was it was a good way to be able to observe and reflect on my thoughts without them having that feedback loop inside my head.
Yeah,
and then later on, particularly after our deployment to Afghanistan when we got back, I was in a pretty low spot. And then I'd kind of given up on some of that journaling practice. And I just let those negative thoughts bounce around. And then it's that negative tailspin that happens, that feedback loop that it is not good. And talking to a doc, he suggested start writing some of those thoughts down, not to like immortalize them, but rather to get them out of your head so the feedback loop stops. And that was incredibly helpful. I use that practice, and I suggest it to my clients often. because it is good or bad. It's good to take your thoughts out and be able to look at them kind of as an observer.
Mm-hmm. I found my biggest qualm initially in writing was I always found writing had a sense of permanence to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if I put it down on paper, then it's an actual thing.
Right.
And it wasn't until I began working with my doc, she was like, okay, well, write down one of the negative thoughts you have, right? And I'd be like, and I would fight her the whole way, and fine, I'll just write it down, right? And then, and she was like, okay, now take it home or go outside, burn it. Gone now, right? There's no permanence to it. It's if you want it to disappear, it can disappear. Shred it, throw it in the garbage, whatever you want to do, right? But it wasn't until I saw that point where I was like, oh, right, it's only the only real permanence is if I let it sit there.
Sure.
Which is if it's in your head, that's permanent, right? It's just floating there,
Exactly.
around,
Exactly.
and it's bouncing off of stuff and making your life difficult. And then and as you said, that negative feedback loop, man, it's killer. If you let that, I used to call them rage spirals, where I would get upset about something small, right?
Yeah.
And then I would then realize that I was upset, and I would start getting angry about the fact that I was upset about it because it was so stupid. And they're like, this is stupid. Why am I upset? And then I'd be angry about the fact that I was upset. And then I would be angry that I couldn't stop being angry about. And so I would just like, and I would ramp all the way up, and I'd just be livid for a while. And it just took me a while to realize, like, man, just stop.
Right.
Take a second, write it down. Or what was the other one we did was say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So once you can hear it and you hear how silly those thoughts actually are or irrational those thoughts actually are, and you're like, oh yeah, okay. Pretty bad. So do you do like a morning, like when you're journaling regularly, is it like a morning and an afternoon, or is it like just one time in the evening? Is it after something happens and then you just kind of like want to jot it down? How does the actual process go?
So I've explored kind of all of those. The best time in my life is when I just carried my journal with me all the time. Mm-hmm. And whenever, like particularly on trips or whatever, and then as stuff happens, or if that good thing or that bad thing happens, you have the tool with you, and you can either jot it down, or if you're not in a position of like you're out doing stuff, I can understand waiting. But evening is probably a great time because it's like, all right, I can reflect on today. Well, what happened? Was I really mad? Was it really as bad as I thought it was? Let's write it down and make fun of myself a little bit. So I kind of like to do it in the evening if I'm unable to just have it with me all day, because it's a good kind of reflection on the events and thoughts of the day. So.
Do you find that? Do you ever get to a point where you're just like you're staring at the page? Like I got nothing. Like I struggle with my son has to do like little writing projects for school and stuff, and he'll stare at the page and just be like, I don't know what to write. And I always just say, just write, man, just anything. I don't care. Like write. I don't know what to write, but do you do you get that those little blocks at times as well? For
sure. And I give myself permission to not have to get super philosophical every journal entry. Sometimes it's as easy as today sucked, or today was awesome. I'll tell you about it tomorrow. If all I can muster is one sentence, that's a win, and I consider that success, and I pat myself on the back, and I'm like, okay with it. I don't have to write, a memoir every evening, going through stuff, but, and kind of what we were talking about earlier, having those small steps, or having that bar super low, where it doesn't require a whole lot of motivation or willpower. It's just, I have permission to just write one sentence, and if I do that, then that's a win.
That's a great line. I use the term at least my new like tagline on the podcast is grace, not slack.
Yeah, exactly.
And you give yourself just a, you know, do what you can right now, but don't give yourself the slack to just not do it.
Right. Yeah. And I think coming from kind of our communities, that term grace is foreign, because we've grown accustomed to operating at such high levels, where a lot is on the line, that if we don't make it perfect, or if we don't make it 100% awesome, then it's like not worth doing almost. And I have to, even today, still have to kind of steer away from that mindset that just because it isn't perfect doesn't mean I shouldn't try and I shouldn't engage in it. So, and that's where that grace comes in. It's like I give myself permission to do one sentence, or, you know, if it's really bad, you know, one word is plenty, you know.
Yeah, it's that process, right? I heard a story once. I can't remember where. I think it was online, and it was a person reiterating another story that they had heard, and it was about a gentleman that had needed to get in shape, and he would go to the gym for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was it, right? And it was just over and over and over and over until that going to the gym was not an issue.
Right.
Then he started taking time to actually work out, and then it started adding up, and then it started so on and so forth. So yeah, I think the idea of just starting with the minimum,
Exactly. Yeah.
and then carrying. I think the biggest struggle for a lot of people is the advancement past the minimum, right? Is once you do the minimum, you're like, oh, okay, I'm done. Versus, okay, you know, maybe I got a little bit more. You know, writing one sentence and there's a couple that I write in a journal. It's called the Daily Stoic Journal.
Okay. Yeah.
From Ryan Holiday. Anyway, it's got prompts in it, morning and night. So, and it asks you random questions, not random, but like stoic questions about, you know, how can I do better today? Little stuff like that. And there's lots of times where I've written in there just like, today sucked. Right. That's fine. Cool. Yeah, that works for today. But I found it interesting doing the morning and the nights, and I found that my style, like what I'm actually thinking about and how I'm thinking about it, changes between the morning and the night. Do you find something similar, like it, or also I wanted to wonder is journaling overseas, did your style change? Did you write more? Was it like less often? How did that affect? Because you're high stress environments, man. Like that's not easy to just sit down and start writing.
Yeah. When I'm home and like not much is going on, I found that like the evenings, I'm more motivated. And so like those are the times that I'm dreaming really big and trying to really plan out the direction I want to take my life. And it's often where I do a lot of like excess Amazon shoppings, buying new books and stuff like that. So yeah, I've noticed a difference in style as well, like versus the morning where it's more just like almost task oriented. Like today is going to be X, Y, Z, for sure. And then, yeah, being overseas, being in Afghanistan is way different than being in like Estonia. And so those styles are different too, but, I would argue I'm maybe a little angrier when I'm not home, and maybe a little more gruff and not as cultured in my writing.
There might be a couple choice words when you're writing. So, okay, well then, do you go back and read those at any point in time? Do you do that on a regular basis, or do you just like? Because I've gone back to read some of my previous posts, and I'm always just like, what am I doing? What was wrong with me at this point in time? But at the same time, I've also pulled some pretty sweet little philosophical tidbits out of rereading a previous thought. Do you get the same thing going on?
Yeah. No, I don't do it regularly, but when I do go back through my journals, uh, oftentimes I'm like, ugh, gross. Why was I writing that? But
Who is this person?
yeah, well, I think that's also a testament to growth and change. Of like,
Mhm.
oh, I was that guy 10 years ago, and now I'm way different. And I'm sure 10 years from now, I'll be just as grossed out by my words. But I agree with you. I think looking back and reflecting on those different periods in your life, because you have a personal document that has documented that time and that day and that moment. It's super interesting. And yeah, I've done the same thing where I've pulled out like, oh man, that sounded really good. I should write that down again.
Got to throw it on the gram.
Exactly.
Make it a post. Yeah. So it's interesting too, because I find that people that write, even journaling or anything like that, they have maybe a better appreciation in terms of speaking, and it getting across your ideas is a lot easier, and being able to formulate the words and all that stuff. And I found that, reading some of my previous entries, it's really helped a lot. And as to what you said, I actually was talking to a buddy of mine about this too, is that if you're the same person that you were 10 years ago,
You're messed up.
yeah, like something's gone wrong, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I think you need to re-examine some areas of your life, because I was talking about, we do Remembrance Day up here, similar to Memorial Day, right? But it is a nationwide thing, right? It is a big deal here, and everybody stops, but we always go to the Legion. All the vets go to the Legion, and we hang out, and you see all the guys that are still serving, and it's kind of hilarious. But there's been a few people, like I've seen them at Remembrance Day, and they're the same person they were 5-6 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago when I served with them, and I'm always just like dude, maybe evolve a little bit, right? Like I just
Exactly.
just move forward a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I man, people are weird. It's tough to be anytime you're dealing with anybody else. Anytime you're dealing with some sort of interpersonal relationship, there's a lot of ebb and flow to it, right? And you gotta be able to push someone if you can into trying to be better. But there's also times where you go like, man, okay, if you're not gonna come along, I'm walking, right? Like, we'll see you later. If you can't pick up your ruck, I'm already gone. Have you ever had any issues in coaching and working with teams, doing that kind of stuff where my buddy Sean told us, he was like, I give people 3. You get 3 strikes. After that, bye. There's 8 billion people in this freaking planet. I don't have time to waste on this. Have you ever run into those kind of situations?
Good question. With coaching, not a ton. People that sign up are usually like ready to evolve, ready to push forward. The folks that I've worked with and chose eventually just not to do the work, I think is because they didn't have enough skin in the game. The initial investment wasn't painful enough to ensure that they did the work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned like bumping into people that haven't evolved in 10 years and kind of separate from coaching, like people in your own life, you can still love them, but if you're on a different path, like it's hard, but sometimes it's just like, I got to spend less energy with you and less time. And if you're going to stay where you are, I love you and I wish you the best, but I have things I have to do. I'm on mission, keep up, and that's difficult because, and again, coming kind of from our communities, it's like no one left behind, but in where we are now as civilians, it's like everybody gets to pick their path, and their choice is whether they're going to do the work and improve, or they're not, and
Yeah.
I know what my path is, and I'm going to continue to try to improve daily. And I would love as many people to join me as possible. But if you were a big part of my life and have chosen not to join me on that path, okay,
Yeah. It's such a hard one. There's a few people in my life that have, just faded off into the distance because
yeah,
they're the same dude I knew 20 years ago. Right.
right,
Like, okay, cool, man. See you later. Now one point though, and I try to correct everybody I hear say this. We are not civilians, and we will never be civilians. Right. And that's the thing, like,
yeah,
the day you step foot on the parade square for your basic training ceremony, graduation ceremony, that civilian that entered, he's dead. Right? That's gone.
Yeah.
And now you're a soldier, you're a sailor, you're a Marine, whatever you are. But when you retire, there's also that transition to going, I'm a veteran now.
Yeah, that's true.
Man, I had a hard time calling myself a veteran, and we funny thing is we do it all the time too when we're talking in in the squad bay or whatever, and you're always just like, oh yeah, when I get out and I'm going to be a dirty civvy again, and ha 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 ha. But you're not.
Right. It's true.
You're not. It's interesting too because I've had this podcast for a while, and I've talked to all kinds of people, all kinds of trades, different elements, different countries, like whatever. Funny thing is we're all pretty much the same though. It doesn't really change. I've talked to like Navy logistics officers, to Royal Marine Commandos, to SEALs, Greenbird, like we all kind of have the same issues basically. Kind of interesting. Now, jumping back into journaling, because I kind of got off track there, but what do you think have been, since you've been doing it, what are some of the big insights that you've had into your own life, into, helping others, or even in the military from journaling? What are some of the things that really struck you as lessons learned?
I think that the biggest one is kind of what we mentioned earlier is getting those thoughts out of your head and in a position where you can observe them is huge, good or bad, but particularly bad. It makes them less scary, less volatile if you can put them on paper and look at them. And again, maybe that's just because, like, if you can see your enemy, you know how to deal with it. So that's been a huge insight for sure. But also, I think there is importance in documenting your life and then reviewing it from time to time. And if only to recognize growth and recognize areas that you have changed drastically. I think that's important because that's part of the self-awareness and knowing your capabilities, and then maybe lastly, being able to write, it does kind of help you. I think Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about this, but the ability to write is the equivalent of being able to think. And so the more practiced you are at writing, the better you can structure your thoughts. And that's important too. You want to be organized in your mind as well as your life, and so if you can engage in practices that help you structure your thoughts appropriately, I think your mind then becomes easier to manage. And when the crappy thoughts show up, they're easier to deal with, even if you don't have paper with you. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That's one of the reasons why this is called Tools from the Toolbox, is the fact that that's all they are, right?
Yeah.
They're tools there for your use, for whether or not you want to apply them, or if they work in this particular situation or not. It's just another tool that you have and it'll apply to something else, right? So what other things have you been, do you think have have you built any other skills with it, or like are you planning on writing at all in terms of doing a book? Has what I mean is like has it led you anywhere? Has it
Sure.
given you a path to something?
Yeah, the writing a book has kind of been on my bucket list for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to wait anymore. So I'm beginning to develop like a manuscript and stuff, and
Nice.
not just to hear myself talk either. I think I do want to provide value to people,
Yeah.
and in similar as to coaching, if I can offer some of those insights in book form, that's only $20 or something that anybody can read it. So that is one direction for sure that I'm heading. So
What do you now? Do you? I just thought of this. Was like, what about writing a journal? What about like creating a prompted journal for other people? Would you use something like that in your coaching as well?
Yeah, for
Or
sure. And
would you?
well, I do provide a workbook for my clients that
Oh, nice.
it has some prompts and some direction, but it's mostly blank, so they can create their own thoughts.
Yeah.
And my intent is to incorporate some of that into the book I actually write, because I think providing opportunity for people to put their thoughts down is important. That's kind of why, as we've been talking about it, like there's a lot of benefits to being able to step back and observe your thought in physical form, and creating a space and an opportunity for people to do that. I think would be good for sure.
Yeah. Again, I was talking to a friend of mine. We were actually talking about teaching, and I love teaching. I love being able to pass. I think the big thing is the passage of information. I love seeing other people take knowledge on board and go, oh, and I call them the aha moments where they grasp a concept and you're like, yes, and you can see it in their eyes. They're like, they got it. Okay, good. And one of the points you brought up was like, was that for me, that was always like a check mark. I was always like, yeah, awesome. But he was like, well, but that's you just casually observing the situation. What about getting more? What about drawing it from them instead of trying to get them to see what I want them to see? How do you get them to see? How do you get them to see it on their own? If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Do you find a similar situation when you're coaching? Even when I find I do it to myself actually quite a bit, where it's like I have to step out of myself to go, oh, okay,
Right.
there it is.
Yeah, it's an interesting dance because I work with all kinds of different personalities that learn in different ways. I often kind of begin with like the workbook. It kind of begins with like what are you most afraid of, or what are you most satisfied with, or least satisfied with, and then the scary page is actually page 2, where it's I break down your life into a couple of different categories, like mental, physical, spiritual, social, financial, and those are the headings. And then it's just blank, and I say write down your thoughts, and then it's interesting the different directions people go. Some people are super future oriented, and they're like, yeah, I want to achieve this and this and this, and I'm super excited about this. Some people are living in the past still, and they're like, this gives me anxiety, and I'm triggered by this, and I'm super uncomfortable pursuing this. And so kind of listening to that dialogue and reviewing some of those thoughts, it is kind of, how do I draw out this perspective that they can see their actual potential? And it's interesting sometimes having to work in different ways because people respond differently. Some people like the army style where I kick you in the butt, say, "Hey, dude, you're messing up," knife hands,
knife hands right there, yeah.
And then some people are like, they need like a big brother almost, where it's just like, come on, man, let's head this way. Tell me what you see. Tell me what you find. So it's an interesting journey and an interesting adventure so far, working with so many different people.
Have you noticed at all, like, have you noticed people shifting from one to the other? From one, like, they go like, I just need a kick in the ass right now, and then 3 or 4 days later, they kind of need a shoulder to cry on, and then have you noticed it goes back and forth at all, or is it very linear?
A little bit. Sometimes, like at the beginning, they just need somebody to tell them to get into gear, and then once they're on track, it's almost on autopilot, and then it is, it's like, all right, awesome, you're doing great, keep it up. I don't need to do boot to ass anymore.
Yeah.
So,
what do you think what's been your biggest challenge so far?
But again, we were talking about this earlier. Is going from quiet professional to now I'm on social media all the time. That's been incredibly uncomfortable for myself. But I am encouraged often by all the comments and stuff on the videos and stuff. People ranging from high schoolers to grandmas saying like the words that I said helped them through that day, and that means a lot. Whatever it is that they're going through, if I could help them get through until tomorrow, that's pretty awesome. So.
Yeah. My wife reminds me of this every once in a while too. Is I'll get caught up in some sort of analytics, or I'll be looking at like the views on the podcast, or how many likes I got on that thing, or whatever, some friggin' trivial whatever. And she'll be like, "Well, why did you start?" And I was like, "Well, I wanted to reinforce the tools for myself, so that I could audibly talk about them with somebody else." And then that evolved slowly into okay, well, if one person gets something out of this, then it's a win across the board. Because it doesn't take a whole lot physically to do. I sit and I talk in front of a computer screen. Not the end of the world. It's a little time consuming when you take into editing and all these other things, but the especially social media, man, that just takes it out of me. But you're right, like those little interactions from people. You get a good comment, or they message you out of the blue and say, "Hey man, that really helped. I really enjoyed that episode. This helped. These, and now I'm here." And both. And it those reaffirmations of like, why are you doing it?
Exactly.
And they're nice to get. Speaking of your why, what led you to coaching, to going from a Green Beret? Right. Oh, and what did you do? What were you? What team? What part of the team were you? Charlie, Delta?
I was actually an 18 Delta, so I was one of the medics on the team.
Yeah.
Which is the best job on the team.
I'm sure everybody says that.
Great question. So, what led me to coaching? It was actually a buddy of mine who's a coach. We've known each other for probably 15 years. When I was in the Army, he's like, "Hey, dude, you should really think about pursuing this once you're out." I was like, "I don't know, man. I don't know if I'd have anything to say to anybody." He's like, "No, you should really think about it." So, as my end of service was approaching, he and I really started to connect and talk about it. And he convinced me that some of my experiences and some of my thought processes would be beneficial to other people. And so I guess I kind of just gave it a shot. And then when I helped my first client, I was like, I actually really like this. I like working one-on-one with people and helping them achieve the things that they want to achieve in their life. And so then I just kind of got hooked. I got really excited about the process and again, meeting new people and helping them with simple processes like backwards planning, helping them achieve the goals that they never thought were possible. It's been pretty awesome. So, long-winded answer. My why is I'm incredibly interested in helping individuals level up their life, and ultimately because I think it will help our society and this generation. be better.
Yeah. We all can be better, right? And it's not a negative thing. I think it's looked at a lot of times as like, you need to be better, like you're worse right now, right? Instead of just looking at it like, okay, you're here, but you can be better. Like everybody can just do better.
Yeah.
And if you're not looking to do better, then you won't. So you have to actively work at it. You keep like, I was saying the other day in one of the live chats I was doing on the collective was, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm okay here. I feel mostly comfortable, and maybe like you'll hit a plateau at some point, right? Sure. Either mentally or physically or somewhere, and it's at that point where I think a lot of people go, okay, we're cool, and they'll just glide. Whereas when I hit that point, I'm like, okay, now that I'm comfortable, I can take the next step.
Exactly.
And then I can go, and then I can move on. I do the same thing in jiu-jitsu. I tell all the guys that I'm teaching, I'm like, okay, it's going to be fluid, and you're going to be all the way, now you're going to be upside down, and then you're going to be on here, and then you get to a position where you can go, okay, whoa, where am I? Oh, I'm in side control. Okay, I know how to get out of side control, and then you can move. But there are points in time where you got to take his breath, right? What just happened? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, that reminded me. So my buddy and I climbed Kilimanjaro back in 2018. Damn. Which was awesome. It was a great trip.
Yeah.
But we were at base camp. We were getting ready to summit like the next morning. So we were going to leave at midnight to get to the peak by sunrise. And so we were chilling on our tents, just kind of, and I did journal about this later, but we were chilling and we heard some screaming from across base camp. And we kind of peeked our heads out of the tent. We're like, what's going on? And some guy was standing out on the other side of camp with his fists over his head, just screaming like, I did it. I climbed the mountain. And my friend Travis and I kind of looked at each other, and this is going to sound bad, but like we were already planning like, all right, what's next? And we hadn't even finished, this mountain. We were already planning like, all right, what's the next adventure? And I think there's this fine line between constantly striving for improvement and better, and also missing out on the moment. You have to be able to like somehow couple both, and that was a big lesson for me. I was missing the moment because I was already thinking of the next adventure, because I'm like obsessed with like improvement and leveling up, and so it was a good lesson to kind of like you said, take that breath and enjoy it.
It's such a hard lesson, especially from the military, man, because we don't do that. We don't allow ourselves to do that, right? We could, right? But it's also, that's a bad thing to do. And I remember doing like, when you're doing like section attacks, you're doing frontal assaults, right? You smash through the objective and you're like, well, yeah, and you throw grenades and stuff. And it's awesome. Great. Good times. And then you hit the consolidation line, and then the work starts for the section commander, right? And you got to wander around and be like, hey, boy, how are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, here are your arcs. What do you need? And you start running around making sure everybody's good to go. Yeah. Because you know that if you were to go, okay, the counterattack's coming, right? You can't relax in that moment because they're coming back for you. But at the same time in life, man, there's times where you just got to settle and be like, okay, take a second, look around. And there's lots of moments there if you let them come in. One of them was I woke up one morning, my wife let me sleep in, and I had a late night before, so she let me sleep in for like an extra hour. And I woke up and I came out, and there were blueberry pancakes on the table that she had made, and the kids were there, and it had already started, and they were, jibber jabbering and they were telling stories to my wife, and she was giggling, and they were all just sitting there in this like perfect moment. Right. And I was about to interject, and I was about to like start getting into it and kind of laughing, but I was like, no, hold on. And I just kind of sat there for a second, and I smiled, and I was watching it, and my wife looked up at me, and she's like, what? Because I was just like staring at her.
Right.
for like a good 5 seconds of just right. It was a little creepy, but if you don't take those moments, they just disappear.
Yeah.
Right. And to really soak them in, and you can still be involved in it, and you can still engage them, and create those moments. But if you don't take the second to enjoy them, then they just disappear. And I love the fact journaling about large events too, being able to write that down afterwards, and then be able to go back on it and relive that and redo it and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
The other thing that kind of just sparked into my head was memory is fallible.
Yes.
Right. And it is, if you don't write it down in that instant, it will change and adjust. And, good memories can slowly turn into bad memories. And, sometimes bad memories can eventually turn into good memories with some work. But if you can write it down, that's there. And that's what happened. Right. That's awesome. So we've been rolling for a little bit over an hour here. I really just, first off, can't thank you enough, brother. It has been great chatting with you.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank
so
you.
much fun. If you have any last points, anything burning in the back of your head about journaling or anything that we've been talking about, coaching, anything?
Whatever you start doing, take small steps first. Whether that's journaling, give yourself the grace to write that one word or that one sentence, and that's okay. And that can be expanded into any endeavor in life. Start small. Yeah,
that's a great point, man. It's just begin, right? Just start. That's for basically everything. Just start. So if anybody wanted to find you, anybody wanted to seek your services, how would they do that? Where would they go?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at coach_Chris.Lee. And my email is Christopher@toptiergoals.com.
Sweet. Well, I'll make sure all that's in the show notes at the end there, and we'll hopefully we'll get some people to you. I mean, make you busier than you already are.
Perfect.
That's exactly what you want. Or maybe I'll just get everybody to go stare at you on Instagram, make you even more uncomfortable.
Incredibly awkward. Awesome.
That's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for being on, brother. It's been my pleasure having you here. We're just great lessons, and I think I'm going to start writing more now because I've been doing these little prompts, and they give me these 8, 9, 10 lines kind of thing, and I fill it up pretty quickly. So I think once I'm done this book, I might just go free form and start writing about my day and letting it happen. We'll see what happens.
That's awesome.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Chimo. All right. That concludes another episode of The Toolbox. I really appreciate y'all listening. It has been my absolute pleasure bringing you this guest. If you enjoyed what you heard, please like, share, subscribe, do all that other wicked stuff. It helps me keep the lights on. To all those out there putting it on the line every day, I just want to let you know that I appreciate you. Military, veterans, first responders, civil servants, you name it. Keep this place running, and I really do appreciate it. So thank you. Don't forget, stay open, stay humble, stay focused, with grace, not slack. Chimo.